At exactly 2:47 a.m., my bedroom door opened by itself. Not a little, not the way a loose latch gives in or the way wood shifts when the air changes. It opened slowly, carefully, like someone was controlling it, like someone didn't want to be heard. I remember the exact moment it started. The handle moved first. Just a slight dip, so small I almost missed it. Then it stopped. Complete stillness. Like whatever was touching it was waiting, watching. Then it moved again, lower this time, until I heard it, a soft click, the kind you only hear when everything else is silent. I was lying there, staring straight at the door, trying to make sense of it, trying to come up with anything that sounded normal, anything that felt safe. Because I knew something that didn't fit. I had locked that door. Not earlier in the night, not hours before, right before I got into bed. Same routine I follow every night. Close it, turn the lock, check it once, then again. I always check it twice. So when I saw the handle move again, and the door begin to open, I felt something I can't really explain. Not fear, not at first. More like confusion, like my brain was refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. The gap widened slowly, inch by inch, and I just lay there, completely still, listening, waiting for footsteps, waiting for breathing, waiting for anything that could explain it. But there was nothing. No sound from the hallway. No movement outside the room. Just the door, opening, and stopping halfway, like someone had changed their mind, or like they were already inside. That's when it hit me. Something opened that door. Then something had to be there, on the other side, or worse, already in the room. And the one thing I couldn't ignore anymore was that I live alone. I wish I could tell you there was something strange about the place from the beginning, something obvious, something I ignored. But there wasn't. That's what makes it worse. Because everything about that apartment felt normal. I had just moved in a few weeks earlier. Nothing dramatic. No big story. Just a quiet decision to start over somewhere new. New space. New routine. Fewer distractions. I work remotely, so most of my life happens inside a room. A screen. A chair. A schedule that slowly stopped meaning anything. Days blended into each other. Wake up. Work. Sleep. Repeat. That was it. No late nights out. No unexpected visitors. No one dropping by. No one with a spare key. Just me. And that apartment. It was on the top floor of an older building, the kind that doesn't make noise unless something actually causes it. No loud neighbors. No traffic bleeding through the walls. Even at night, it stayed quiet in a way that almost felt sealed off. Like the outside world didn't quite reach it. At first I liked that. I needed that. Silence made it easier to focus, easier to think, easier to sleep. Or at least, that's what I thought. I had been trying to fix my sleep schedule. For weeks, I'd been going to bed earlier, setting alarms, cutting off screens, doing everything you're supposed to do when you want your life to feel a little more controlled. And it was working, slowly, night by night, until everything felt stable, predictable, safe. Nothing felt wrong at first. There were no strange sounds, no flickering lights, no doors opening, no feeling of being watched, just quiet. Every night, I followed the same routine without thinking about it. Check the windows, turn off the lights, lock the front door, then the bedroom door. Always the bedroom door. I don't even know when that habit started, but I never skipped it. Close it, turn the lock, check it once, then again. That second check always mattered. Like it confirmed something. Like it drew a line between me and everything else. Then I'd get into bed, pull the covers up, and let the silence take over. No distractions, no interruptions, just me. And a room that felt completely empty, completely mine. And for a while, that's exactly what it was. Until the night it changed. Until the first time, the door didn't stay closed. The first time, it didn't feel like anything. That's how it starts. small enough to ignore, easy enough to explain. I woke up that morning the way I always did, slowly, not fully aware yet, just staring at the ceiling, letting my thoughts catch up with me. Nothing felt different, nothing felt wrong, until I sat up and looked at the door. It wasn't closed, not wide open, just slightly. A narrow gap where there shouldn't have been one, just enough for the darkness of the hallway to sit there, quietly, like it had been there all night. I remember staring at it for a few seconds, not moving, just trying to piece it together, because I knew something about it didn't make sense. I always close it. I always lock it. That's not something I forget. But the longer I looked at it, the easier it became to explain. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I thought I locked it, but didn't. Maybe the latch didn't catch properly. It happens. Doors shift. Old buildings settle. Small things go wrong all the time. So I got up, walked over, and pushed it shut. Checked the lock. Turned it. Listened for the click. What? Then again. Everything felt normal. Solid. Exactly the way it should be. And that should have been the end of it. It should have stayed small. Forgettable. But it didn't. Because the second night was different. I went through the same routine. Same steps. Same checks. Closed the door. Locked it. Tested it twice. Got into bed. Turned off the light. And let the silence settle in again. At first, everything was the same. Still, quiet. Nothing out of place. Then, somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up. Not fully. Just enough to notice something. A sound. Faint. So faint it almost blended into the silence. That's when I heard it. A slow, dragging creak. Not loud. Not sudden. Just steady. Like something moving carefully. Trying not to be noticed. I didn't move. I stayed exactly where I was, staring into the dark, listening. Because at that moment, my mind was still trying to help me. Trying to make it normal. Old hinges. Wood expanding. Temperature changes. All the usual explanations. But the sound didn't stop. It continued. Oh, drawn out. Controlled. And then, it paused. Complete silence. The kind that makes your ears strain, waiting for something else to follow. And in that silence, I became aware of something I hadn't noticed before. The position of the door. I couldn't see it clearly in the dark, but I knew, somehow. I knew it wasn't closed anymore, and I didn't remember opening it. I didn't remember getting out of bed. I didn't remember anything that could explain why that sound had happened. So I lay there, completely still, trying to convince myself it was nothing, trying to believe that when morning came, everything would make sense again. But deep down, something had already shifted, because that sound didn't feel random. It didn't feel accidental. It felt time. And for the first time, the silence in that room didn't feel empty anymore. The third night, I paid attention, not because I was afraid, not yet, but because something about the night before stayed with me, just enough to feel unfinished, like a question that hadn't been answered. So I went through everything more carefully, closed the door, turned the lock, pressed against it to make sure it held, listened for the click. What? Then again. I even stood there for a few extra seconds, just looking at it, like I expected something to happen right then. But nothing did. It stayed still, solid, exactly the way a locked door should be. So I turned off the light, got into bed, and told myself the same thing I had been telling myself since this started. It's probably air pressure, old hinges, nothing serious. That's how things like this work. You explain them. You reduce them. You make them small enough that they don't follow you into the dark. And for a while, it worked. The room went quiet. The kind of quiet you stop noticing after a few minutes. My breathing slowed. My thoughts drifted. And eventually, I fell asleep. Then, I woke up. Not suddenly. Not with panic. Just awake. Like something had gently pulled me out of sleep without making a sound. I didn't move at first. I just lay there, staring into the darkness, trying to understand why I was awake. That's when I noticed it. The door. It wasn't closed. Again. Just slightly open. Just enough to be wrong. And then, I heard it. That same sound. That slow, dragging creak. Long. Controlled. Unrushed. The door was moving. Opening further. Right in front of me. And this time, I didn't look away. I watched it. Every inch. Every small shift. Trying to catch something, anything, that would explain it. But there was nothing. No shadow in the hallway. No movement beyond the frame. No hand. No shape. Just the door. Opening. And stopping halfway. Again. The exact same position. The exact same pause. Like it had reached a point, and that was enough. I felt my chest tighten slightly, but I still forced myself to think through it. Air pressure. Maybe the window. Maybe something with the building structure. Old hinges. Loose alignment. Nothing serious. That's what I told myself. That's what I needed it to be. Because the alternative didn't make sense. I stayed awake for a while after that. Listening. Waiting. But nothing else happened. No footsteps. No breathing. No movement. Just silence. Eventually, exhaustion took over again, and I fell back asleep. When I woke up in the morning, the door was closed, completely shut, locked, exactly the way I had left it the night before. That's when something changed, because now, it wasn't just strange. It didn't just feel off. Now it felt impossible. I walked over slowly, put my hand on the handle, turned it. The lock clicked open, from the inside. Exactly where it should have been. Exactly how I left it. So how did it open? And more importantly, how did it close again? I didn't have an answer for that. So I did the only thing I could think of. I decided to test it. That night, I didn't just go to bed. I prepared. I placed my phone next to me. Screen facing up. Brightness low, but visible. I wanted to know exactly when it happened. If it happened again. Same routine. Same steps. Close the door. Lock it. Check it once. Then again. Press against it. Make sure it doesn't move. Then into bed. Lights off. Silence. And this time, I didn't fall asleep right away. I stayed awake, watching the faint outline of the door in the dark. Waiting. Minutes passed. Then more. My eyes adjusted. The room became clearer in shadows. Still nothing. No sound. No movement. Just quiet. At some point, I must have drifted, because the next thing I remember, I was awake again, and the room felt different. Not louder. Not colder. Just different. Like something had already happened. I didn't move. I didn't even look at the door right away. Instead, I turned my eyes slowly toward my phone. The screen lit up faintly as I tapped it. 2:47 a.m. I stared at the numbers for a few seconds. Then, I looked at the door. And right as I did, the handle moved. Just slightly. Then lower. Then stopped. That same pause. That same waiting. And then, the door began to open. Again. The exact same way. The exact same speed. The exact same sound. And I felt something settle into place in my mind. Something I didn't want to accept, but couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't random. This wasn't the building. This wasn't pressure. This wasn't a loose hinge. Because the time was exact. 2:47 a.m. I kept watching, barely breathing, as the door reached that same halfway point and stopped. Again. Silence. Nothing else. Just that open space, leading into darkness. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Maybe more. Then, slowly, the door began to close. On its own. No sound. No force. Just a steady movement. Back into place. Until it shut completely. And the lock. Clicked. Soft. Precise. Final. I didn't move for a long time after that. I just stared at it. trying to process what I had just seen, trying to find a way to explain it, to break it down into something manageable. But the number stayed in my head. 2:47 a.m. Exactly. Not around that time. Not close to it. Exact. And the next night, it happened again. Same routine. Same moment. Same sound. Same pause. Same movement. Same closing. I checked my phone again. 2:47 a.m. And the night after that, the same thing. No change. No variation. No mistake. Every detail, identical. Every movement, repeated. Every second, precise. Until the pattern became impossible to ignore. Until the explanation I had been holding on to started to fall apart. Because this wasn't random anymore. This wasn't mechanical. This wasn't environmental. This was consistent, controlled, intentional. And the one thought I couldn't push away anymore, the one thing that kept repeating in my head, was something I didn't want to say out loud. Because the moment I did, it would become real. It would mean something was there. Something I couldn't see. Something that knew exactly when to move. Exactly how to move. And exactly when to stop. Every single night. By the time it had happened enough times, I stopped trying to ignore it. Patterns don't lie. And this one was too precise to dismiss. Same time. Same movement. Same pause. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to sleep through it anymore. I was going to watch it happen, from beginning to end. Not half awake. Not guessing. Not filling in the blanks the next morning. I needed to see it clearly. I needed to prove it was nothing. That's what I told myself. I'll prove it's nothing. I said it out loud that night, just to hear how it sounded. Just to make it feel real. Because if I could explain it, then I could stop thinking about it. Stop waiting for it. Stop feeling like something in that room didn't belong to me anymore. So I prepared again. More carefully this time. Closed the door. Locked it. Pressed against it harder than before. Tested the handle. What? Then again. Then a third time. Just to be sure. I even stood there, longer than usual, watching it, memorizing its position, the way it sat perfectly aligned in the frame. No gaps. No shift. Nothing out of place. Then I turned off the light. Got into bed. And didn't move. I kept my eyes on the door. Focused. Unblinking. The room slowly adjusted around me. Darkness became shapes. Shapes became outlines. The door stood there, solid, still, exactly where it should be. Minutes passed. Then more. Time stretched in a way that didn't feel normal anymore. Every second felt heavier, slower, like the room itself was waiting for something. I checked my phone. 1:58 a.m. Too early. Still quiet. No sound. No movement. I kept watching. My eyes burned a little, but I didn't look away. I didn't want to miss it. I couldn't miss it. Another glance at the phone. 2:21 a.m. The silence deepened. It felt thicker now, like it had weight to it, like it was pressing in from all sides. I shifted slightly in bed, just enough to adjust my position. And for a moment, I thought I heard something. A faint sound. So small it almost disappeared the second I noticed it. I froze. Listened. Nothing. Then I looked back at the door. Still closed. Still locked. Still exactly the same. I told myself it was nothing. Just my mind reacting to the quiet. Just anticipation. That's what happens when you wait for something long enough. You start creating it. You start hearing things that aren't there. I checked my phone again. 2:46 a.m. 1 minute. I felt my chest tighten slightly. Not fear. Just awareness. Heightened. Focused. Everything in me was locked onto that door. Watching. Waiting. Then the numbers changed. 2:47 a.m. And the handle moved. Instantly. No delay. No build-up. The moment the time changed, it happened. Just a slight movement at first. Barely noticeable. Then lower. Then it stopped. That same pause, that same stillness, like something was holding it there, thinking, deciding. My breath caught in my throat, but I didn't move. I didn't blink, because this time, I was watching every detail, not guessing, not imagining. The handle stayed down, frozen in place for a few seconds. Then slowly, the door began to open, the same way as before. Slow, controlled, deliberate. But this time, something changed. It didn't just open and stop halfway. It reached that same halfway point and paused. Again, complete stillness. No sound, no movement. Just that open gap, sitting there like it was waiting. And then, it continued, slowly, further than before. The gap widened, inches turning into more. The darkness from the hallway stretching deeper into the room. And I felt something shift inside me, because that had never happened before. It had always stopped halfway, always, but now, it was going further. Not wind, not random. There was a pattern to it, a decision, a change, and I could feel it even without seeing anything beyond the door, like something had crossed a line. The door kept moving, not fast, not sudden, just steady, like it was being guided, like whoever or whatever was opening it knew exactly how far I wanted to go. I could hear it now, that faint dragging creak, stretching out in the silence, longer than before, deeper, more deliberate. Then, it stopped again, but this time, it wasn't halfway. It was almost fully open, just a few inches short, like something had decided that was enough. I stared into the darkness beyond it, trying to see something, anything, a shape, a shadow, a shift, but there was nothing, just blackness, so empty. And yet, it didn't feel empty anymore. That was the part one couldn't explain. That was the part that didn't fit into anything logical, because even without seeing anything, I felt it, a presence, not moving, not making a sound, just there, on the other side of that open door, waiting, watching. The seconds stretched again, longer than they should have. I didn't move. I didn't breathe properly. I just stared, locked into that moment, trying to understand what I was looking at, or what I wasn't seeing. And then, slowly, the door began to close, but not the same way as before. Not smooth, not continuous. This time, it stopped, midway through closing, just slightly, then moved again, like something had interrupted it, or adjusted it, or changed its mind. My chest tightened, because now it wasn't just repeating a pattern. Now it was different, reacting, adapting. And that question, the one I had been avoiding, the one I hadn't let myself fully think about yet, came back stronger than before. Why does it pause? Not randomly, not by chance, but at specific points, like something is deciding when to move, when to stop, when to continue. The door finally closed. The lock clicked again, soft, precise, final. But the room didn't feel the same anymore. The silence didn't feel empty anymore, because now, I wasn't just watching something happen. No, it felt like something was watching me back. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was alone in that room anymore. After that night, I stopped trying to explain it away completely. I still wanted answers. I still needed something that made sense. But now, I also needed proof. Something physical. Something I could point to and say, this shouldn't have happened. Because until then, it was just movement. Just something I saw. Something I experienced. And that leaves room for doubt. But objects don't lie. Objects don't imagine things. Objects don't misremember. So the next night, I changed the routine. Not drastically. Just enough to test it. I closed the door the same way. Turned the lock. Checked it once. Then again. Pressed against it harder than before. Feeling the resistance. Making sure it held. Then I stepped back. And looked at the room differently. not as a place to sleep, but as something I needed to observe, something I needed to control. That's when I grabbed the chair. It was a simple chair, light enough to move easily, but solid enough to stay in place once positioned. I carried it across the room, slowly, deliberately, and wedged it under the handle, angled just enough so that if the handle moved, the chair would resist it. Not completely block it, but enough that it couldn't open without pushing the chair out of the way. I stepped back again, looked at it, adjusted it slightly, then tested the door from my side, pressed forward. The chair held, firm, stable, exactly how I wanted it. I stood there for a moment, staring at the setup, letting the idea settle in my mind. If it moves, then something's wrong. No explanations, no excuses, no maybe. If that chair shifts, then something physically moved it, and there's no way around that. I repeated it quietly, just to hear it. If it moves, then something's wrong. Then I turned off the light, got into bed, and faced the door. The outline of the chair was visible in the dark, a faint shape against the door, a barrier, a test, a line drawn. Time passed, slowly at first, then heavier. The room settled again into that same silence, but now it felt different, thicker, more aware, like something was already there, waiting. I kept my eyes open for as long as I could, watching, tracking every shadow, every small shift of darkness, but nothing happened. No sound, no movement. Eventually, my body gave in, not fully asleep, but drifting. That in-between state where you're not fully aware, but not completely gone either. And then, morning. It came too quickly. Light creeping in through the edges of the room, soft, quiet, normal. For a few seconds, everything felt fine. Just another day, another routine, another morning, until I opened my eyes fully and looked at the door. It was open, wide enough to be undeniable, wide enough that there was no mistake, and the chair was no longer under the handle. It had been moved, not fallen, not tipped over, moved, pushed aside, just enough to clear the door's path. It sat a few feet away, angled slightly, like it had been placed there carefully. I didn't move right away. I just stared at it, trying to reconstruct what could have happened, trying to force the situation into something logical. Maybe I moved it in my sleep. Maybe I got up and didn't remember. Maybe. But no, that didn't fit, because I would have heard it. The scrape of wood against the floor, the shift, the impact, something, anything. But there was nothing. No memory, no sound, no interruption. Just this. I sat up slowly, my eyes fixed on the chair, then the door, then back to the chair. Everything about it felt wrong. Not chaotic, not messy, precise, intentional. Like something had moved it and made sure it stayed upright, made sure it didn't fall, made sure it didn't make a sound. I got out of bed, slowly, my movements careful, controlled, like I was afraid to disturb something I couldn't see. I walked toward the chair first, reached out, touched it. It was solid, exactly where it appeared to be. No signs of it slipping, no marks on the floor, no indication of force, just moved. Then I turned to the door, fully open now, leading into the hallway. Still, quiet, empty. I stepped closer, looked out. Nothing. No one. No movement. Just silence. The same silence, but now it felt different. Because now, I knew something could move in that room, without making a sound. That realization didn't come all at once. It settled slowly, like something sinking deeper into place. Because before, there had always been sound. The creak, the movement, the slow dragging noise. Something I could track, something I could follow. But this was different. This was quiet, completely quiet. No noise, nothing. And that changed everything. Because now, it meant I couldn't rely on hearing it. I couldn't wait for a sound to warn me. I couldn't listen for movement, because whatever it was, it didn't need to make noise anymore. It could move right next to me, and I wouldn't know. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the open doorway, feeling something shift inside me. Something deeper than confusion now. Something heavier than curiosity. Because this wasn't just a pattern anymore. This wasn't just something repeating. No, it had changed the rules. It had crossed into something else. Something quieter. Something closer. And the worst part, the part one couldn't ignore, was the thought that kept returning, stronger each time. If it could move the chair, without a sound, then what else could it do? Without me ever knowing? That was the moment the fear changed. Not sudden, not overwhelming, but steady, growing. Because now, it wasn't just about the door anymore. It was about the space around me, the room, the distance between where I was and where something else might be. Something I couldn't hear, something I couldn't see, something that didn't need to make a sound, to move. After the chair, I couldn't rely on memory anymore. I couldn't rely on what I heard, or what I thought I heard, because whatever was happening, it had already shown me it didn't need sound. It didn't need force, and it didn't need me to be awake. So I did the only thing left that couldn't be argued with. I brought in something that would see everything, whether I was there or not. A camera. Not anything complicated. Just my phone. But it was enough, because a camera doesn't assume. It doesn't forget. It doesn't fill in gaps. It just records exactly what's there. Exactly what happens. That's what I told myself as I set it up that night. Camera doesn't lie. I said it quietly, almost like I needed to believe it more than anything else. I positioned it on the desk across the room, angled directly at the door, checked the frame, adjusted it slightly, made sure both the handle and the lower part of the door were clearly visible. Nothing hidden, nothing out of view. Then I turned off the light, got into bed, and let it run. I didn't stay awake this time. Not fully. I couldn't. The exhaustion had been building for days, and part of me didn't want to watch it happen again. Not like that. So I let the camera do it for me. Let it see what I couldn't. Let it capture whatever was happening without interference. The night passed in fragments. Half sleep, half awareness. Moments where I thought I heard something. Moments where I thought I felt something shift in the room. But I didn't open my eyes. I didn't move. I just stayed still and waited for morning. When it finally came, it felt too normal. Light filtering in. Silence returning to its usual shape. The kind of quiet that should have been comforting, but wasn't anymore. Because now, I had something to check. Something that would either explain everything, or make it worse. I got up slowly, walked over to the desk, picked up my phone. My hands felt steady, but there was something underneath that. Something I couldn't ignore. Anticipation. Not excitement. Not curiosity. Just tension. Because once I pressed play, there was no going back. No pretending it didn't happen. No explaining it away without seeing it first. I opened the video, scrolled through the timeline, fast-forwarded slowly, watching the empty room play out in silence. Nothing. Just stillness. Minutes passing. Shadows barely shifting. Everything exactly the way it should be. Then I slowed it down. Checked the time. 2:46 a.m. I paused for a second, then pressed play again. 2:47 a.m. The handle moved. On screen. Clear. Unmistakable. I leaned in slightly, my eyes fixed on it, watching every detail. The handle dipped slowly, exactly the way I had seen it before, then stopped. That same pause, that same hesitation. Then it moved again, lower, until the latch released, and the door began to open, slowly, deliberately, exactly as it had every night. The camera didn't shake, didn't blur, didn't miss anything. It captured the entire movement, from start to that halfway point, where it paused again. And for a moment, I felt something settle inside me, because this was it. This was proof. This was something I could analyze, break down, understand. But then, I looked closer, and that feeling shifted, because there was nothing there. No shadow crossing the frame, no shape behind the door, no movement in the hallway, no change in light, no sign of anything causing it, just the door, moving, on its own. I rewound it, played it again, slower this time, frame by frame, watching every inch, every second, trying to catch something I missed, anything, but there was nothing, no explanation, no presence, no visible cause, just motion, controlled, precise, and completely unaccounted for. My breathing slowed as I kept watching. The video continued. The door moved past the halfway point this time, further, wider, until it reached that near-open position, and stopped. Again. The room on screen looked exactly the way I remembered it. Dark, still, empty. But now, that emptiness didn't feel real anymore, because I knew something had to be there. Something the camera wasn't showing. Then, it happened. Right at that moment, the video glitched, just for a second. A single flicker, a distortion across the frame, like something interrupted it. Not a full cut, not a loss of recording, just a break, a disruption. I paused it immediately, rewound, played it again. The same spot, the same moment. Right as the door reached its widest point, the image distorted, lines across the screen, a brief flicker of something, then normal again. I leaned closer, paused on the exact frame, but there was nothing clear, nothing defined, just a split-second disruption that shouldn't have been there, because the rest of the footage was perfect. No glitches, no skips, no issues, only that moment, only that point, only when the door was open. I replayed it again, and again, and again. Each time, the same thing, the same flicker, the same interruption, perfectly timed, perfectly placed. And the question that followed didn't come all at once. It built slowly, piece by piece, because now, it wasn't just about what I saw. It was about what I didn't see, what caused the glitch, not the door. The door was visible, clear, uninterrupted, but something at that moment, something at that exact point in time, had interfered with the recording, just enough to distort it, just enough to hide something. And the more I thought about it, the more something else began to form, something worse. Because if the camera didn't show anything, but still reacted, then maybe it wasn't that nothing was there. Maybe it was that whatever was there didn't appear the way it should, didn't register the way it should, didn't show up the way everything else did. I sat there, staring at the screen, the paused frame frozen in front of me, and for the first time, I felt like I was looking at something I wasn't supposed to see. Not directly, not clearly, but close enough to know it was there. And that single thought stayed with me longer than anything else. Because now, the room wasn't just being affected. No, even the camera couldn't fully capture what was happening inside it. I didn't stop watching the footage. I couldn't, because something about that glitch didn't feel like an error. It felt placed, like it happened for a reason. So I went back again, not just replaying it, studying it, slowing it down even further, frame by frame, watching every second stretch out longer than it should. The room on the screen looked exactly the way I remembered it. The desk, the bed, the door, everything in its place. Still, quiet, empty. But I wasn't looking at the whole room anymore. I focused on the edges, the places people don't usually pay attention to, the darker areas, the corners, the parts of the frame that don't move, until they do. I dragged the timeline back, right before 2:47 a.m., pressed play. The handle moved. The door opened, the same way, The same speed, the same pause, nothing new, nothing different, until I slowed it again, right before the glitch. And that's when I noticed it. Not immediately, not clearly, just something. A slight shift in the darkness near the door, so small it almost disappeared if you weren't looking for it. I paused, zoomed in, adjusted the brightness, watched it again. At first, it didn't make sense. It didn't look like anything recognizable. Not a figure, not a shape, just a distortion, a faint difference in the way the darkness sat in that corner of the room. But the more I stared at it, the more it became consistent. It wasn't random. It didn't flicker like the glitch. It was there before the glitch, before the door reached its widest point, before anything changed in the recording. And slowly, that detail began to settle into something I couldn't ignore anymore, because that shadow wasn't in the hallway. It wasn't beyond the door. It wasn't outside the room. It was inside, already there, near the wall, close to the door, but not beyond it. I felt my grip tighten around the phone, because now, everything I had been thinking, everything I had been assuming, started to break apart. The idea that something was opening the door from the outside, that something was trying to get in, that something was entering the room, none of that fit anymore. I replayed it again, and this time, I didn't look at the door. I watched the shadow. It didn't move much, not in a way you could easily describe, but it changed, slightly, subtly, like it was already there, and reacting to the door opening, not causing it from outside, but responding from within. The glitch happened right after, right as the door reached that near-open position, and for a split second, the shadow seemed to stretch, or shift, or become something more defined. Then the distortion hit, and it was gone, or hidden again. I froze the frame, sat there in silence, letting that realization form slowly, piece by piece, until it couldn't be ignored anymore. Because now, there was only one explanation left that fit everything I had seen, everything I had heard, everything that had happened. And the words came out before I could stop them. That's when I realized. I paused, because saying it felt different, heavier, more real. The door wasn't letting something in. Silence. Just the faint sound of my own breathing in the room. And then, it was letting something out. The moment those words settled, everything changed. Because now, the pattern made sense. The timing, the pauses, the control, the way the door stopped halfway, the way it continued, the way it adjusted. It wasn't random. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't environmental. It was intentional. And it wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from inside the room. From somewhere within the space I had been sleeping in every night. The same space I thought was empty. The same space I thought belonged to me. I slowly lifted my eyes from the phone and looked around the room. Not quickly, not sharply, just carefully, taking in every corner, every shadow, every place where something could exist without being seen clearly. And for the first time, I wasn't just looking at the room as it was. I was looking at it as something that could be hiding something else. Something that didn't need to be visible all the time. Something that didn't need to make a sound. Something that could stay perfectly still until it chose to move. The air felt different now. Heavier, closer. Like the distance between me and everything else in that room had changed. Because if it was already inside, then it had always been inside. Not just during the night. Not just at 2:47 a.m. But before that. Before I noticed anything. Before the door ever moved. Before I even started paying attention. And that thought didn't come with panic. It came with something worse. A slow understanding. A quiet shift in awareness. Because now, there was no clear boundary anymore. No outside. No inside. No safe space separated by a locked door. Because the thing I had been trying to keep out had never been outside to begin with. And the door The thing I had trusted to protect me was never a barrier. It was part of it, part of whatever was happening, part of whatever was moving, part of whatever was waiting. And as I sat there, looking at that paused frame, that faint shadow barely visible near the edge of the door, one final thought settled in, quietly, completely. If it was coming out at 2:47 a.m., then where was it the rest of the time? After that realization, there was no going back to normal, no routine, no comfort in repetition, because now I understood something I hadn't before. The door wasn't the beginning of it. It was the end of something, a moment, a transition. And whatever was happening at 2:47 a.m. was only part of a larger pattern. So that night, I didn't just stay awake. I prepared differently, not to prove anything anymore, not to test anything, but to see it fully, clearly, without interruption. I went through the same motions, but slower, more deliberate. Closed the door, locked it, checked it once, then again. My hand stayed on the handle a little longer than usual, like I was expecting it to move beneath my fingers. But it didn't. Not yet. I stepped back, looked at the room, every corner, every shadow, every space where something could exist without being noticed. Nothing moved, nothing shifted, but I didn't trust that anymore. I turned off the light, got into bed, and lay still, completely still. Eyes open at first, then slowly, I let them close, not fully asleep, not drifting, just pretending, letting my breathing slow, letting my body settle into the rhythm of sleep. Because if it was inside the room, if it was already there, then maybe it needed me to not be watching. Time passed, slowly. Every second stretched. Every small sound felt amplified, even the sound of my own breathing. But I didn't move. I didn't react. I stayed still, waiting. Then, without opening my eyes, I felt it, a shift, not in the air, not in temperature, something else, something harder to define, like the room had changed position around me, just slightly, enough to notice, enough to feel wrong. I kept my breathing steady, slow, even, like I was still asleep, and then, I heard it, that faint, dragging creak, soft, controlled, measured, the same sound, the same movement. The door, 2:47 a.m. had arrived. I didn't need to check the time anymore. I knew. I slowly opened my eyes, just enough to see, just enough to take in the outline of the room in the dark. The door was moving, exactly the way it always did, handle dipping, pause, then opening, inches at first, then more. The darkness from the hallway spilling in, stretching across the floor. But this time, I didn't focus on the door. I didn't follow its movement, because something else had already taken my attention. Something that didn't belong, near the corner of the room, partially hidden behind the furniture. Something that hadn't been there before. Or maybe, something I had never noticed before. I didn't move. I didn't react. I just watched, from where I lay, trying to understand what I was seeing. At first, it didn't have a clear shape, just a presence, a distortion in the darkness, like the shadows in that corner were deeper than they should be, thicker, more solid. Then, it became clearer, slowly, as my eyes adjusted, a tall shape, standing, completely still, facing toward the door, not shifting, not breathing, not making a sound, just there, watching. And something about the way it stood felt wrong, not just because it was there, but because of how still it was. Too still, like it didn't need to move unless it chose to, like it had been standing there for longer than I could understand. My body stayed frozen, every instinct telling me not to react, not to let it know I was awake, because something about it felt aware, not in a human way, not in a way I could recognize, but aware enough to notice change, aware enough to react. The door continued to open, slow, controlled, reaching that familiar halfway point, then pausing. And in that pause, the shape moved, not suddenly, not sharply, just shifting forward. One step, then another, soundless, completely silent. No footsteps, no friction, nothing, just movement toward the door. My chest tightened, but I didn't move. I couldn't, because now, I wasn't watching the door anymore. I was watching it, as it moved across the room, closing the distance, reaching the doorway. And as it approached, the door responded. Not faster, not slower, just continuing, opening further, like it was making space, like it was allowing it through. And for a moment, the shape paused again, right at the threshold, half in the room, half in the darkness beyond. And that's when it turned. Not fully, just slightly. Enough for me to see that it wasn't just a shape. It had form, edges, a presence that felt focused, directed toward me. Slowly, I turned my head, just enough to meet it. And that's when I saw it. Not clearly, not in full detail, but enough to understand, enough to know that whatever it was, it didn't belong in that room, and it knew I was there. The space between us felt smaller now, closer, like the distance didn't matter anymore, because even without moving further, it felt near. And for a second, everything stopped. The door, the movement, the silence, all of it held in place, as if something had reached its peak, as if the moment had been waiting for that exact point, for that exact connection. And then, without a sound, without a warning, it turned back toward the door and stepped through. The door opened the rest of the way, just enough to let it pass. And then, it was gone. The darkness beyond the doorway swallowing it completely, leaving nothing behind. No trace, no sound, no movement, just the door, beginning to close again, slowly, carefully, returning to its place, until it shut completely, and the lock clicked, soft, final. But the room didn't feel empty anymore, because now, I had seen it, and that changed everything. I didn't sleep after that, not even for a second. I stayed exactly where I was, staring at the door long after it closed, long after the lock clicked, long after the silence settled back into the room. But it wasn't the same silence anymore. Now it felt occupied, like something had passed through it and left something behind. I didn't move until the light started to come in, slowly, carefully, like I was giving the room time to become normal again, even though I already knew it wouldn't. When I finally got up, everything looked the same. The furniture, the walls, the door, all exactly where they should be. No signs of anything unusual, no evidence of what I had just seen. But that didn't matter anymore, because now, I had something else. The recording, the one from the night before, the one that captured everything. Or at least, that's what I thought. I walked over to the desk, picked up my phone, and for a moment, I just held it, not opening it yet, not pressing play, because part of me already knew whatever was in that footage was going to change something again. So, I opened it, scrolled to the timestamp, 2:47 a.m., and pressed play. The door moved, exactly as before, handle dipping, pause, then opening. The same motion, the same control, the same silence. But this time, I didn't watch the door. I skipped ahead, rewound, slowed it down, frame by frame, going back earlier, before the handle moved, before the door shifted, before anything started. And that's when something caught my attention. Something I hadn't noticed before. Something I hadn't been looking for. At first, it was barely visible. Just a slight difference in the darkness, near the same corner of the room, the same place I had seen it the night before. I paused, zoomed in, adjusted the brightness again, and the longer I stared at it, the clearer it became. Not suddenly, not sharply, but enough to recognize the outline. The same tall shape, standing, completely still, facing toward the door. And the time stamp was earlier, much earlier, minutes before 2:47. I rewound further, watched again. The room sat in silence. Nothing moved, nothing changed, but the shape was already there, not entering, not forming, not appearing, already there, in the room, before the door even moved, before the handle dropped, before the pattern began. My breath slowed as I kept watching, because now, the sequence I thought I understood was breaking apart again. The door wasn't the start of it. It wasn't even the middle. It was something else entirely. Something that happened after. Something that followed. I replayed the moment where it moved, where it stepped toward the door, and I paid attention to the timing. Not just what it did, but when it did it. It didn't react to the door opening. It moved before it. Subtle. Almost unnoticeable. But there. A shift. A slight adjustment. Like it knew what was about to happen. Like it didn't need the door to open first. Like it was already part of the process. And that's when everything settled into place. Not all at once, but slowly, piece by piece, until there was no way to ignore it anymore. But when I checked the footage again, I paused, because saying it felt heavier than before, more final. I realized the room around me felt smaller, closer, like the walls had shifted inward, just slightly. It was never outside. Silence. No sound. No movement. Just that realization. Sitting there. Unavoidable. Because everything I had believed before, every assumption, every explanation, had been built on the idea that something was coming in, that something was entering the room, that the door was the boundary, the point of entry, the beginning. But it wasn't. It never was. It had always been inside, before the door moved, before the sound, before the pattern, before I even noticed anything at all. And the door wasn't opening for it to come in. It was opening because it was already there, already waiting, already positioned in that corner, already standing in the space I thought was empty. I looked up from the phone slowly, my eyes drifting toward that same corner of the room, the place where it had been, where it always was. And for a moment, I didn't want to look directly at it, because now, I knew something I couldn't unlearn, something I couldn't ignore, something that changed the way that room existed around me. Because if it had always been inside, then it had been there while I slept, while I worked, while I moved around without thinking, while I stood in that exact spot, completely unaware. And the thought that followed was quieter than the rest, but heavier, because now, there was only one question left. If it was always inside, then what was it doing? Before 2:47, I didn't stay. Not after that. Not after seeing it. And not after understanding what that meant. There are things you can ignore. Things you can live with. Things you can convince yourself aren't real. But that wasn't one of them. Because once you know something is there, once you understand it isn't coming from outside, that it's already inside the space you exist in, there's no way to go back to normal. No way to pretend you're alone again. I packed slowly, not all at once, not in a rush, just enough each day to make it feel controlled, manageable, like I was leaving on my own terms. But even then, I avoided certain parts of the room, that corner especially. I didn't look at it directly anymore, didn't stand near it, didn't let myself pause long enough to think about what might still be there. Watching, waiting. The nights felt longer after that, heavier. Even when nothing happened, it felt like something could, like it was choosing not to. And that was worse, because now, it wasn't just about the pattern anymore. It wasn't just about 2:47. It was about the time in between, the hours where nothing moved, but something could still be there. I left within a few days. No explanations to anyone. No questions asked. Just gone. New place. Different building. Different layout. Different door. Everything changed. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The first night there felt strange, but not in the same way. It was unfamiliar. Empty in a different sense. No memories attached to it. No patterns yet. No reason to expect anything. I set up my things. Kept the lights on longer than usual. Checked the door. Closed it. Locked it. Then checked it again. Same routine. Even in a new place, that habit didn't go away. I got into bed. Lay there for a while, letting the silence settle around me. It felt lighter here. Less heavy. Less aware. And for the first time in days, I felt like maybe it was over. Maybe whatever had been there was tied to that apartment, that room, that space. Maybe it didn't follow. Maybe it couldn't. Eventually, I fell asleep, not fully relaxed, but enough to let go, enough to stop thinking about it, even if just for a few hours. Then, sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up, the same way as before. No sudden movement, no reason, just awake, still, listening. At first, there was nothing, just the quiet, the normal kind, the kind that should feel safe. Then, I heard it, faint, slow, familiar, that sound, that dragging creak. My body went still instantly, not moving, not reacting, just listening, because I knew that sound. I had heard it too many times to mistake it for anything else. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to confirm it, because as long as I didn't see it, there was still a chance I was wrong, still a chance it was something else. But the sound continued, well, controlled, measured, exactly the same. And slowly, I turned my head toward the door, my eyes adjusting to the darkness, trying to find the outline, trying to understand what I was seeing. And that's when everything stopped making sense again, because the door wasn't moving. It couldn't. There was no shift, no gap, no opening, nothing out of place. And then I realized why the sound didn't match what I was seeing, why something felt wrong in a completely different way. Because the door in that room was different. It wasn't like the one before. It didn't swing open. It didn't use a hinge. It didn't move the same way. It couldn't make that sound. Not that sound. Not ever. I felt something settle deep in my chest. Slow, heavy, unavoidable. Because now, there was only one explanation left. The sound hadn't come from the door. It never had. I stayed there, staring at it, waiting for something to happen, waiting for the room to prove me wrong. But it didn't. Nothing moved. Nothing shifted. Just silence again, slowly returning. Like nothing had happened. Like everything was normal. But it wasn't. Because now, the pattern didn't need the same place. It didn't need the same door. It didn't need the same room. And the worst part is, the door in my new place doesn't even have hinges. I've gone over it again and again. Every night. Every detail. Every second leading up to that moment. Trying to understand it. Trying to find something I missed. Something small, something simple, something that could make it make sense. But there's always something that doesn't fit. The timing. The silence. The way it moved. And the way it was already there. Inside the room. Before anything even began. So now, I'm asking you, what would you have done? Would you have stayed, knowing something was standing in that room with you every night, waiting for the same exact moment? Would you have kept watching, kept recording, tried to understand it even after seeing it move? Or would you have left before it ever got that far? And what do you think it was? Not just something that opens doors, but something that waits, something that doesn't need to make a sound, something that doesn't need to come in, because it's already there, already inside, watching, learning, choosing when to move, because whatever it was, it followed a pattern. And patterns don't just stop, they continue, they adapt, they change. And sometimes, they come back. So tell me, if you were in that room, at exactly 2:47 a.m., and you heard that sound again, would you stay, or would you leave? And if this story stayed with you, if it made you think, if it made you look at your own door just a little differently, then you already understand something most people ignore. This is just one story, one account, one moment, but there are more. And they don't get easier. They don't get lighter. They get closer, darker, more real. So if you want to hear the next one, the one that doesn't wait until 2:47, the one that doesn't need a door at all, then subscribe, because the next story might feel a little too familiar. And this time, you might not be able to look away.